The hum of low conversation and the clinking of glasses filled the air at the Rusty Nail, a local bar nestled in the heart of our small Kentucky town. The wooden beams above glimmered under the dim lights, casting long shadows over worn-out tables. I leaned back in my chair, the creaking with a familiar song, and scanned the room. It was a Friday night, but it felt like a Tuesday, empty save for a couple of regulars nursing their beers at the far end. Hey David, stop zoning out. Jason's voice snapped me back. He was leaning over the table, his trademark smirk plastered on his face, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. You look like you just saw a ghost. Or a really bad haircut. Matt chimed in, his laughter booming like a drum. He was sprawled lazily in his chair, his red baseball cap turned backwards, giving him that perpetual air of easygoing charm. Haha, very funny, I muttered, forcing a smile. The light banter was a welcome distraction, but something nagged at me. Where's Josh? Dustin asked, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the table. He was the analytical one, the planner. Always had a notebook in his pocket, filled with ideas and thoughts. I shrugged, glancing toward the entrance as the door swung open. Just then, the door swung open again, and Josh walked in, his flannel shirt tucked neatly, and his dark hair slightly damp from the humidity outside. Sorry, guys, he said, a hint of breathlessness in his voice. Had to finish up a shipment. Perfect timing, I said, gesturing for him to sit. We were just reminiscing. Oh God, here we go again, Jason said, rolling his eyes. This better not involve the time we tried to catch that raccoon. Oh, it totally is. Matt laughed. What was it, 2005? You guys were so scared. You hid behind me, only because you were the one who insisted on approaching it. Dustin chuckled, his eyes sparkling with humor. You thought it was a dog. Whatever happened to that raccoon? I asked. I'm pretty sure it ran off with my sandwich. Yeah, but it was worth it to see your face, Jason said, leaning back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his lips. As the laughter echoed around the table, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. It was supposed to be a night of good memories, but the message from Amy's parents loomed over me like a dark cloud. Guys, I began, my voice steady but low. I got a text from Amy's parents. The laughter faded into an uneasy silence. What do you mean? Josh asked, his brow furrowing. I swallowed hard, the memories of Amy flashing through my mind. Her wild hair, her infectious laughter, her adventurous spirit that led us all into trouble. She's missing. She went backpacking in Romania. What? Jason's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. Are they sure she's not just off the grid? Not like Amy, I replied, shaking my head. You know her. She always checks in. Her parents are terrified. Damn it, Dustin said. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. Matt leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from carefree to serious. What are we thinking? Just jump on a plane and go to Romania? That's insane. No, it's not. I interjected, my heart racing. We need to find her. She's in trouble. I can't just let this go. Whoa, easy there, cowboy, Jason said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Let's not turn this into a mission impossible right here. We need a plan. A plan? I echoed. What's the plan? Sit here and hope for the best? What if she's hurt, or worse? Okay, Dustin said, his voice calming. Let's regroup. We can head to your house, get some information on where she might be. I know the internet has some resources. Great idea, Josh added, already standing up. Let's get everything we need and start looking. As we filed out of the Rusty Nail, the cool night air hit my face like a slap. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the silence. My mind raced with thoughts of Amy, and the urgency of the moment pressed heavily on my chest. Hey, David, Jason said, falling in a step beside me. You okay, man? Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile. Just worried. Look, we'll find her, he said, his bravado returning. We always do, right? Yeah, I replied, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I needed to be strong for them, but the weight of responsibility was crushing. At my house, the air was thick with anticipation. We gathered around the kitchen table, papers scattered under the dim light. Dustin opened his laptop, and the screen flickered to life. "Okay, here we go," he said, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. "Let's figure out what we're dealing with." Hoia-Baciu Forest, Josh read aloud, his brow furrowed. "What's the deal with that place?" "There's a lot of folklore," Dustin replied, scrolling through articles. "People say it's haunted. There are stories of disappearances, strange lights, all sorts of stuff." "Sounds like a horror movie," Matt said, shaking his head. "Or a bad camping trip," Jason added, leaning back in his chair. "Guys, this isn't a joke," I snapped, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "This is serious. If she's out there, we can't afford to take it lightly." Dustin's fingers paused on the keyboard, and he looked up, concern etched on his face. "I get it, David, but we need to be smart about this. We can't just run into the forest without knowing what we're up against." "Right," I said, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart. "So we prepare. We gather supplies, research, and then we go." "Sounds like a plan," Josh said, determination in his voice. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted from humor to palpable tension. We packed supplies, each of us revealing a piece of ourselves. Dustin's practical gear, Matt's eclectic music collection, Jason's rugged essentials from his camping days, and my military gear, all carefully organized. "Hey, what about this?" Matt said, holding up an old cassette player. "I could bring some tunes." "Not exactly what we need in the middle of a haunted forest," Dustin said dryly. "It'll keep morale up," Matt replied, grinning. I couldn't help but smile. In the face of uncertainty, these moments reminded me of the bond we shared. But as I packed a flashlight, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on my mind. I glanced at my friends, their faces lit with determination. Each of them had their own reasons for helping me find Amy, but I felt the deepest responsibility. She was like a sister to me, and I would do everything in my power to bring her back. As we gathered our gear, the shadows in the room seemed to creep closer, the air thick with unspoken fears. I could feel it. A storm was brewing, and we were about to step into its eye. "Are we ready?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart racing. "Ready as we'll ever be," Dustin replied, adjusting his glasses. "Let's do this." With one last glance at the familiar walls of my home, I knew there was no turning back. We were about to embark on a journey into the unknown, a quest that would test our friendship, our courage, and our very sanity. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the winding roads of Romania as we drove toward Hoia-Baciu Forest. The air was thick with anticipation, excitement mingling with a creeping sense of dread that curled in the pit of my stomach. My friends, Dustin, Matt, Jason, and my brother Josh, were all huddled in the cramped back seat of the rented van, their faces illuminated by the fading light. "Man, this place is beautiful," Josh said, leaning forward as he peered out the window. "But eerie too. Did you see that? The way the trees just stand there like sentinels." "It's not just the trees," Dustin replied, his voice steady, almost clinical. "The locals have stories about this forest. They say it's haunted, something about the spirits of those who got lost inside." "Spirits?" Jason scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Come on, man. It's just a bunch of old wives' tales. We're here to find Amy, not get spooked by some ghost stories." He leaned back with a grin, clearly unfazed, but I could see the tension in Matt's shoulders as he fiddled with his camera, capturing the last slivers of sunlight. "Yeah, but what if those stories are true?" Matt murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. What if she's still out there?" I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "We're gonna find her, guys. We have to." My voice was firmer than I felt, but I needed them to believe it. I needed to believe it. As we approached the small village that bordered the forest, the landscape shifted dramatically. The quaint houses with their thatched roofs stood in stark contrast to the looming trees that seemed to beckon us. A chill breeze swept through the open windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and something more metallic, like iron. "Stop!" Dustin suddenly shouted, pointing toward a small group of villagers gathered by a well. "We should ask them about the forest." I pulled over, the van crunching on the gravel. We stepped out, the air growing heavier with each step toward the locals. They eyed us with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, their conversations halting as we approached. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound confident. "We're looking for someone. Have you heard anything about the forest?" One of the older men stepped forward, his face lined with the weight of untold stories. "You shouldn't go in there," he warned, his voice gravelly. "The forest is not what it seems. Many have entered and never returned." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my heart racing. "We just need to find our friend." The man shook his head, his eyes darkening. "The Hoia-Baciu takes what it wants. Strange noises, lights that flicker where no light should be. It plays tricks on the mind. You'll hear things that will make you question what's real." "Sounds like a load of crap to me," Jason muttered under his breath, earning a sharp glare from Dustin. "Why don't you tell us what you really think?" Dustin challenged, crossing his arms. "Enough," I said, cutting in. "We appreciate your warning, but we have to go in. We'll be careful." The old man nodded slowly, but his expression remained grave. "Then go. But remember, the forest does not forget." We climbed back into the van, the tension thick as we drove toward the forest entrance. Each tree seemed to loom larger than the last, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I parked near a clearing, the weight of the forest pressing down on us. "Let's set up camp here," I suggested, my voice steady despite the unease brewing inside. We unloaded our gear, the sound of rustling bags and snapping tent poles filling the air. As night fell, we gathered around a small campfire, its flames flickering against the encroaching darkness. The atmosphere shifted, laughter giving way to an uneasy silence. I glanced at each of my friends, their faces illuminated by the firelight, shadows dancing across their features. "Okay, who's got a ghost story?" Matt asked, breaking the tension. "I'll go first," Dustin said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "There's a tale about a lost girl who wandered into Hoia-Baciu. They say she still roams the forest, searching for a way out. If you hear her crying, it's already too late." "What does she look like?" Josh asked, his brow furrowing. "Some say she wears a white dress, stained with dirt, her hair flowing like fog. Those who see her, they vanish." Dustin's eyes gleamed with the thrill of storytelling, but I could see the shadows creeping in on his confidence. "Sounds like a load of crap," Jason said, tossing a stick into the fire. "What's next? A werewolf story?" "Actually, there are legends about wolves too," Matt interjected. "But they're not like the ones in fairy tales. They're different, more sinister. They say they can mimic the voices of lost souls." "Great, now I'll have nightmares." Jason chuckled, but his bravado was faltering. "I'm serious," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter. "This place is something else. I can feel it." The flames crackled, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. I stared into the fire, a strange connection pulling me toward the forest. It was as if Amy's spirit was weaving through the branches, calling out to me. "David," Josh's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just thinking." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. "We need to stay focused. Tomorrow, we enter the forest. Together," Dustin added, his tone serious. "No splitting up. We stick together, no matter what." "Agreed," I affirmed, glancing at the others. Their expressions mirrored my own, an uneasy mix of determination and fear. As the fire burned low, the night grew still, an oppressive silence enveloping us. We each settled into our sleeping bags, the whisper of the wind rustling through the leaves outside. Just as I began to drift off, a distant sound pierced the quiet, a soft, haunting moan that sent chills racing down my spine. "What was that?" Matt whispered, his voice trembling. Jason laughed, but it was thin and forced. "Probably just the wind, man. You all are getting paranoid." But I knew better. "No, it didn't sound like the wind," I replied, sitting up. "It sounded like someone lost. Let's check it out," I said, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Are you crazy?" Dustin shot back, his eyes wide. "We can't just wander into the dark." "I have to," I insisted, my heart pounding. "What if it's Amy? What if she's calling for help?" The group exchanged glances, a silent debate raging between them. Finally, Josh stood, his expression resolute. "I'm going with you." "Me too," Matt added, shivering. "Fine." Jason relented, though I could tell he was reluctant. "But we stick together. No one gets left behind." As we crept toward the edge of the forest, the shadows deepened, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. The moan echoed again, clearer this time, and I felt an inexplicable pull urging me forward. "Wait," Dustin whispered, his voice barely audible. "Do you see that?" In the distance, flickering lights danced among the trees, twisting and turning like fireflies caught in a storm. My breath caught in my throat, a mix of fear and hope surging within me. "Let's go," I urged, stepping into the darkness, the forest swallowing us whole. The weight of the trees pressed in around us, and I could hear my friends' nervous breaths as we ventured deeper, the flickering lights drawing us closer. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, and as we moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for us, hidden in the darkness. The forest was alive with whispers and rustling leaves, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a voice, soft, melodic, and achingly familiar. "David, did you hear that?" I stopped, heart racing. "Hear what?" Jason asked, squinting into the shadows. "Someone is calling my name." I insisted, the urgency flooding my veins. "It has to be her. It has to be Amy." But as I stepped further into the abyss, a sense of dread washed over me. The forest was watching, and I could feel its eyes upon us, waiting for the moment we would falter. "David, don't!" Josh reached out, but it was too late. The lights flickered again, and with a deep breath, I plunged into the darkness, my friends right behind me, our bond tethering us to the light of hope that flickered in the depths of despair. The forest felt alive, the air thick with an unsettling energy that prickled at my skin. As we ventured deeper, the trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the gray sky. I could feel David's presence beside me, a steadying force amidst my growing unease. But the pull of the unknown was stronger than ever. "Guys, look at this!" Dustin called out, his voice echoing through the silence. He crouched beside a crumbling stone wall, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into the surface. "This must be some kind of ancient architecture." Matt raised his camera, snapping pictures as he moved closer. "It's incredible. I can't believe we found this place," he said, excitement shining in his eyes. "Just wait until I show these to everyone back home." "Yeah, well, just remember to take pictures of the creepy stuff too," Jason chimed in. His bravado a thin veil over the tension hanging in the air. He swung his flashlight around, illuminating the shadows that danced along the walls. "This is like a horror movie set. I half expect a zombie to pop out any second." "Stop it, Jason," I said, rolling my eyes. But I couldn't deny the knot forming in my stomach. The village was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. "Let's split up and see what we can find," Dustin suggested, his curiosity outweighing any sense of caution. "We'll cover more ground that way." Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked, looking between the others. I could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on us, urging me to stay close. Come on, David, Jason said, his tone teasing. What are you afraid of? A little spooky village won't hurt you. I clenched my jaw, unwilling to show my hesitation. Okay, fine. Just stay in sight. Let's meet back here in 30 minutes. As we split up, I felt a mixture of dread and curiosity wash over me. I turned my flashlight toward the nearest building, a tall structure shrouded in vines. The door hung ajar, creaking softly as I pushed it open. The interior was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of decay. I stepped carefully, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls, revealing faded murals of what looked like villagers engaged in some kind of ritual. My heart raced. Hey, David, check this out. Dustin's voice broke through the silence. I hurried outside, spotting him standing in front of a stone altar covered in moss. What did you find? Look at these symbols, he said, pointing to the carvings. They're not just random. They mean something. Or they're just old, Jason shouted from the other side of the village. You guys are getting way too into this. Shut up, Jason, Matt said, his voice muffled as he focused on taking another photo. We're trying to understand this place. The atmosphere shifted, a chill creeping in as I scanned the area. My heart sank when I noticed something on the ground, a torn piece of fabric caught on a jagged stone. I knelt down, my breath hitching. As I recognized the pattern, Amy, I whispered, clutching the fabric tightly. Panic surged through me as I looked up, my friend's laughter abruptly silenced. Guys, we need to regroup. Before I could call out again, the forest erupted into chaos. From behind the trees, figures emerged, wild and disheveled, their eyes glinting with hunger. Run! I shouted, adrenaline flooding my veins. Dustin stumbled back, his eyes wide. What the hell are they? Cannibals! Jason yelled, lunging for the nearest building. Get inside! Matt snapped a frantic picture, but I grabbed his arm, pulling him away. Forget the camera. We need to get out of here. We sprinted deeper into the village, the sound of bare feet pounding against the earth echoing behind us. I glanced back, heart racing, and saw a group of villagers gaining on us, their faces twisted in manic grins. Over here, Jason shouted, darting toward a narrow alleyway between two buildings. We followed him, squeezing through the tight space. Where do we go? Matt gasped, glancing over his shoulder. There's too many of them. Just keep running, I urged, my voice strained. The adrenaline coursing through me dulled to fear, but it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Suddenly, my foot caught on a root, and I stumbled, hitting the ground hard. David, Dustin shouted, but I could only watch as the others continued forward, fear etched on their faces. I scrambled to my feet, but it was too late. A hand seized my arm, pulling me back into the shadows. Got one, a villager growled, his breath rancid and hot against my skin. Let me go, I yelled, kicking wildly as I was dragged backward. My heart pounded in my chest, panic rising as I saw my friends disappearing into the distance. Guys, help! David! Jason's voice pierced through the chaos, but it was quickly swallowed by the sounds of laughter and screams. I fought against my captor, but his grip was like iron. The villagers surrounded us, their faces obscured by shadows, eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. Over here, one shouted, pointing to where the others had vanished. The others are ours. No, I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat as I struggled against the hole. Let them go. But my pleas were met with cruel laughter, echoing through the village as they began to drag me away. We'll feast well tonight, one of them crowed, his voice dripping with malice. The last thing I saw was Jason's terrified expression as he turned back, his eyes wide with fear. David, he shouted, but the distance grew. the sound fading into the eerie quiet of the forest. "Guys," I cried, but it was too late. The villagers pulled me deeper into the shadows, their laughter ringing in my ears as darkness enveloped me. In that moment, I knew we had stumbled into something far worse than I could have ever imagined. I jolted awake, gasping for breath as cold air filled my lungs. Blinking against the darkness, I tried to focus, but my surroundings were a void, tight claustrophobia. My wrists ached, bound by something coarse and unyielding. Panic clawed at my chest as I struggled to remember how I got here. Dustin? Matt? Jason? My voice cracked, barely a whisper in the stifling silence. Muffled cries echoed from somewhere nearby, and my heart raced. They were alive, but where? The memory of our last moments in the village flooded back, faces twisted in hunger, the overwhelming scent of decay, the chilling laughter of the villagers. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground resonated through the darkness, and I instinctively pressed my back against the wall. My military training kicked in, memories surfacing like ghosts. Flashback. Basic training, listen up. Sergeant Miller barked, his voice slicing through the morning fog. In survival, it's not just about physical strength. It's about mental resilience. You adapt where you die. I remembered the grueling days spent in the woods, learning to navigate using nothing but the stars and the whispers of the wind. The drills, the endless push-ups, the late nights spent studying tactics. Adapt or die. A scream pierced the air, pulling me back to the present. The cries were closer now, filled with fear and desperation. I strained against my bindings, feeling the fibers dig into my skin. If I could just rip, the rough material tore against my efforts, and I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through me. Come on. I twisted, using my body weight to snap the fibers. Pain shot through my wrists, but I didn't stop. With one final push, the bindings broke, and I was free. Breathless, I rubbed my raw wrists and peered into the dark. The dim glow of firelight flickered through a gap in the wall. Crouching low, I crept toward the sound, my heart pounding in my ears. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of something foul. As I neared the opening, I peered through the crack. My stomach turned. The villagers were gathered around a fire, their faces painted with grotesque symbols. Their eyes gleaming with a primal hunger. In the center lay a figure, bound and motionless. No! Panic surged again, but I pressed my palm against my mouth to stifle my gasp. Ushka Jihad, they chanted in a guttural language, their voices blending into a haunting melody. The rhythm was unsettling, a song of death. I recognized the figure's clothing. It was Matt. No, please no, I whispered, my voice barely escaping my lips. Flashback. Combat training, control your fear, David. Sergeant Miller's voice echoed through the training grounds as I faced my opponent. Fear can either be your ally or your enemy. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to steady. Fear was a weapon, a tool to be wielded. I had to think. I turned away from the scene, my heart racing. I had to find my friends. I needed to move, to act. My mind raced through the skills I had learned. Steads, reconnaissance, évasion. The villagers were engrossed in their ritual, oblivious to my presence. I slipped back into the shadows, scanning for a way out. The village was a labyrinth of darkened huts and twisted trees. Suddenly, a voice broke through the night. They will feast tonight. The blood of the lost will nourish our spirits. I froze, pressing my back against the cold wall. Lost? My friends were still alive? The forest hungers. Another villager's voice, deep and gravelly, responded. We must offer the sacrifice to appease it. Sacrifice. The word sent a chill down my spine. I needed to find Dustin and Jason. They couldn't be far. I darted between the huts, my heart racing, the weight of their fate heavy on my shoulders. Each step was calculated, every sound amplified in the silence. A faint glimmer caught my eye, a reflection in the darkness. I crept closer and found a knife, its blade glinting in the firelight. I slid it into my pocket, the metal cool against my skin, and continued through the village. My breath hitched as I heard another cry, this one filled with anguish. I followed the sound, moving quickly yet cautiously until I reached a clearing. There I saw them, Dustin and Jason, tied to a wooden post. The villagers surrounding them, chanting, their eyes wild with fervor. "You will bring us strength," a tall villager shouted, raising a rusty machete high above his head. "Get away from them," I shouted, my voice breaking through the ritual's chant. The villagers turned, their eyes narrowing as they spotted me. "Intruder," one screeched, pointing a gnarled finger in my direction. I didn't think. I lunged forward, adrenaline fueling my movements. "Dustin, Jason," I called, rushing toward them. "David." Dustin's voice was filled with relief, but it was quickly swallowed by the villagers' growls. I reached for the knife, brandishing it before me. "Get back," I shouted, my voice echoing in the clearing. The villagers hesitated for a moment, surprised by my audacity. But the moment passed, and they surged forward with primal fury, their chants rising in intensity. Swish! I slashed at the air, keeping them at bay. "Hold on, I'll get you out." The villagers lunged, and I ducked, narrowly avoiding a heavy blow. "Stop him," one of them yelled. I felt the rush of air as another villager swung a branch toward me. I dodged, my military instincts kicking in as I countered with a swift javelin. The blade bit into the villager's arm, and he howled. Stumbling back, "David, behind you!" Jason shouted, his voice tinged with fear. I spun around just in time to see another villager charging at me. Thud! The impact knocked me against the ground. The wind knocked out of me. "Kill him!" The command rang out, and I knew I was outnumbered. I had to think. I rolled away, scrambling to my feet, heart pounding. "We must offer him to the forest," they screamed. Their voices a cacophony of madness. "Not if I can help it," I shouted back, adrenaline surging. I needed a distraction. I lunged toward the fire, kicking dirt and embers into the air. The villagers recoiled.